Okay, I think we'll get cracking. A few people can probably join in a little bit later as I go through the preamble. Thanks for joining the second session. Hopefully I won't have as many technical gremlins in this one as I did in the first one. As you can see, I'm remote working, and I'm going to be talking to you about the role of the Fish Health Inspectorate, based around a little video that we've made that tries to encapsulate what life is like on the average day of a fish health inspector. As a little bit of a background, the Fish Health Inspectorate, we're based at Cefas down in Weymouth. We've been in existence in one form or another as a fisheries directorate or an inspectorate since at least the late 1930s. And we are the competent authority for the control of serious and notifiable diseases in England and Wales. Serious and notifiable diseases generally being ones that are either difficult to or impossible to treat, that have a high mortality rate and can cause large-scale environmental or ecological damage as well. The Inspectorate currently has around 25 members of staff. We have 12 field inspectors, who you'll see a little bit more of later. We have 6 or 7 people in our aquatic trade advice team. As I'll explain later, we control our imports and exports of live aquatic animals into and out of this country. I think the most important thing to note is that the United Kingdom has an extremely high health status compared to pretty much the rest of the world. We've had fish health legislation in place since 1937, when a group of what could be seen as fairly forward-thinking members of Parliament decided that they wanted to protect the salmon that invariably were swimming in the rivers of their large country estates. And they'd noticed declines in the numbers, and therefore they banned all imports of live salmonid fish, salmon, brown trout, into the United Kingdom, legal imports into the United Kingdom. And that's probably the main reason, because we had fish health legislation that dates back that far, that we maintain our high health status today. Pieces of that legislation still existed up to 2009 in various bits of fish health regulations, and you can see shadows of it in our aquatic animal health regs 2009, which is what we currently operate under. The main role, or I suppose the day job of the Fish Health Inspectorate, is monitoring aquatic animal health. So we deal with finfish, shellfish and crustacea, and we have several hundred farms throughout England and Wales that farm anything from trout for the table market, the ones that you'll see in the supermarket, through to trout for put and take restocking fisheries, carp for the same reason. We have koi farms. We have a Panayad shrimp industry that's very much in its infancy at the moment. There are a huge number of shellfish farms dotted around our coast, and that doesn't even include wild gathering of shellfish and crustacea. So we have a lot of different things to cover. The fish farms that we visit are authorised by us under the Aquatic Animal Health Regulations, England and Wales 2009. And under those regulations, we set a series of authorisation conditions for those businesses that they must adhere to. And those conditions are designed to prevent the spread of disease, serious disease, in and around the country. We expect them to keep extremely detailed movement records. We expect them to keep mortality records, all records of their treatments and any medicines that are being used. And on that front, we've recently introduced a live fish system which records in real time movements of aquatic animals onto and off of sites. And what that does is it enables us to get the jump on any potential outbreaks of disease. Recently, for instance, we've been involved in tracing imports of rainbow trout eggs from Denmark. Denmark have recently basically declared an infection with something called infectious hematopoietic necrosis, which is a very, very serious disease, which is exotic to the UK. However, we are reliant on imports of eggs from Denmark for our farms. And so my colleagues and I have spent most of the last couple of weeks Tracking down where these eggs have gone and testing them using the diagnostic functions at the Weymouth lab, and thankfully giving all of those imports the all clear. But as a result, we've now banned all imports of eggs from Denmark for the foreseeable future until they can prove to us that they've got a handle on the outbreak. So I mentioned imports of eggs there. We also control all of the imports of live aquatic animals into this country, the legal ones, the ones that can come into this country from areas that are of a equivalent or higher health status. They need to come into the country accompanied with a veterinary health certificate that's signed by a vet. And we also control our exports. There is a small export business, and all of those shellfish that are exported will come with a health certificate from us that's signed by one of my colleagues, and that travels with the fish to the country of their destination, and that shows that we are sending those fish as free from various diseases we control in this country. We also control non-native species in aquaculture and the ornamental industry. Things like, well, for instance, this morning I was at Billingsgate Fish Market at 3 o'clock trying to track down some illegally imported Australian, New Zealand eels, Anguilla australis, that had just turned up in an import and were now being sold live through Billingsgate Market. And that's clearly a bit of a no-no if any of you know where Billingsgate is. It's right on the River Thames, and having a potential non-native species that can, especially one like an eel, which is a fairly tenacious creature that can wiggle around and make its way across dry land quite happily. We needed to get into that very quickly. So that's another example of us controlling imports. We have an enforcement remit. We're a regulatory body. My role is the operational enforcement lead. We are covering pretty much anything from basic non-compliance to the regulations on fish farms, right through to illegal importation of very high value carp from areas of a lower health status. For instance, the carp angling fraternity are always looking for very, very large carp to help with their sport, and they are worth a fortune in this country. If you go to somewhere like France, you can buy a 25 kilo carp for £2,000 to £3,000. If you can get that into this country, you might be looking at £25,000 to £30,000. So those profits, along with the fairly small fines that we're allowed to give, will very often encourage the likes of organised criminal gangs to get involved. The last shipment that we stopped at Dover Port, 120 fish, probably with a market value of pushing £400,000 in the UK. So it's quite a broad church that we cover. And of late, we've also got involved a lot with overseas work, advising other governments on things like enforcement, on policy, and also setting up equivalent fish health inspectorates in other countries. We've been working in Oman very recently, in Ghana. Obviously, COVID has had a bit of an issue with that. I myself have been working in Indonesia with Joe on the trade in CITES species sharks and rays. And so the skill set that the Inspectorate have is pretty broad, and I think it's something that has been very beneficial to Cefas, certainly in the last 10 years, with regards to using our skills to broaden Cefas's palette. So what I'm going to do, I know you're all here for the movie. We've recently filmed a day in the life of a fish health inspector, and this is the bit where it all went terribly wrong for me last time. So I'm going to try and share my screen. It's about 10 minutes long. It shows one of our star inspectors, Josh, making his debut performance on the big screen. So I'm going to attempt to play this, and then once it's finished, you can have some time to think of any questions or anything you want to ask. Then we can have a bit of a discussion session at the end. So I'm going to mute myself and probably hang up.
Hi, I'm Joshua Gray. I'm a fish health inspector with Cefas. So today we're going to a site called Franklin's Fish Farm. It's an online trout farm producing brown trout and rainbow trout, predominantly for the restocking market, to stock into both put and take lake fisheries and rivers. Visiting fish farms is a regular part of our job. Visiting sites such as this one, trout farms, is predominantly a sort of springtime visit, but also autumn. So in spring and autumn, it's quite regular for us to be visiting sort of trout farms. As the Fish Health Inspectorate, we authorise quite a wide range of farms, or what we call APBs, which is aquaculture production businesses. So it's very typical for us to be visiting various APBs throughout the year. I was working in insurance up to I was sort of 22, 23, and then decided that it wasn't really the road I wanted to go down. So I decided to retrain and go back to university. So I attended a university quite local to here called Sparsholt, and done a course in sport fisheries and aquaculture. I never really knew exactly what it was that I wanted to do, but I knew that was the sort of area in which I wanted to work. So I was doing my course at Sparsholt and carrying out some voluntary work experience and paid work at various fish farms around Hampshire, where we are now. And as part of that, fish health inspectors like myself would come and visit, and I sort of got to see what they did and found it quite interesting. So I applied to do a voluntary work placement with Cefas during my second year of university. So I went down to Weymouth and stayed there for a month and done a month of voluntary work. Really enjoyed it and decided that it would be something that I'd love to do in the future. And then, the job came up and I applied for it and got it. There's an enforcement aspect to the work we do. One of the inspectors, John Hullen's sort of head of enforcement, and I've recently become his deputy. So there's certain authorisation conditions that our APBs have to abide by, and if they don't, then there's various enforcement actions that we can take against them to make sure that the industry is compliant with the conditions that we set out.
And there's rather a lot of potholes in this part of the world, aren't there?
Lots of potholes, but you get good at avoiding them when you do the amount of driving that we do. Quite a lot of time is spent on the road. It does sort of vary between the team based on the areas that you have. There's a small team of fish health inspectors, and we cover the whole of England and Wales. The country is divided up. So, if you're someone that's got a couple of northern areas, you could do a bit more driving. We try and make it as even as possible, but inevitably we do end up doing a lot of driving, particularly when we're on what we call ad hoc weeks, which is a rota system that all the inspectors are on. When it's your ad hoc week, you're a sort of reactive inspector, and you'll be sent out to disease investigations and authorisation visits and stuff like that. Then you could be travelling all over the country. But we do spend a lot of time on the road, but it's just a part of the job.
What's your favourite part of the job, would you say?
To me, I love the fact that there's so much variation in what we do. No 2 days are really ever the same in the inspectorate, which is quite ironic considering this video, I think, is a day in a typical day as an inspector. But because we do authorise quite such a range of aquaculture production businesses, it means that 2 days are never the same. Biosecurity is something that we take very seriously with the inspectorate, so we're always making sure that all contact points between sites are thoroughly cleaned and disinfected. So that includes our Wellington boots, our iPads and hands, and any other kit that comes in and out of the car. So we travel around with some Virkon solution in a pump that's connected to the car. It means that we can give our boots and everything else a real good clean.
I think we're getting a good clean today because of the weather.
We are. This is a typical day in the life of inspector, and we've got the weather for it. So, sorry about that. Today's visit's only a routine disease inspection, or part of the visit's a routine disease inspection. But as inspectors, we always carry kit that will allow us to take a sample if needs be. So today, if we came and we suspected that there was a disease outbreak, a serious disease outbreak, we've got enough kit in the car in order to take a full disease screen for virology, bacteriology, molecular and histology purposes, and then we could get that shipped straight back to the lab and they would process. Okay, so the other aspect of the visit that we're conducting today is the compliance, we call it a CompFF, which stands for Compliance Fish Farm visit. What we're doing there is we're making sure that the site is compliant against the conditions that are set out within their authorisation certificate. We always have access to sites' authorisation certificates. They are part of the supporting files which actually come through on the individual visit on the iPad. So I've got those in front of me. Mike's also got a copy up in the wall of the office. Obviously we're out here today in order to be compliant with COVID measures. But I've got the authorisation conditions in front of me, and then Mike's kindly got me all the records. So we're checking things such as movements, medicines, mortalities and transport records. The movement records have recently gone onto an online system called FHI Online, which has been developed in-house. And the guys here at Franklin's have taken to it really well. So I'm sitting here, I'm just looking through their movement records, transponding those with the transport records to make sure that they're recorded both places, and then reviewing the mortality records, making sure we haven't had any unexplained increases in mortalities over the last 12 months, and then also sort of corresponding that with the medicine records and making sure that the medicine records are in the prescribed format.
Hi, I'm Mike from Franklin's Fish Farms. We're a restocking farm, so we supply live rainbows and browns to fisheries, rivers and other farms around the south coast. So we're at our fry unit now, so we bring fish in from fry suppliers at around 5 grams to come into our fry unit here, where we feed them to about 30. They're injected, they're vaccinated against furunculosis and enteric red mouth for the rainbows, at which point they're then moved up to a pond on my left there, and then grown up to about a pound before they're graded off again to the bottom half of the farm, where we grow to a kilo plus, basically to whatever the customer would like, basically. But generally that's around a kilo is our market size. So the fry here will feed, generally try and feed at least 3 times a day. At this sort of stage of their life, they're feed pretty heavily. Okay, so we've finished doing the compliance aspect of the visit. So now we're doing the walk round. The walk round we do for a few different reasons, actually. Primarily, it's to conduct a visual stock assessment, and we're looking for disease. So we call it a root sow visit. So here we're doing a visual inspection and we're trying to see if there's any presence of mainly 2 diseases, and that is VHS, which is viral hemorrhagic septicemia, and IHN, which is infectious hematopic necrosis virus. Each site gets one of these visits every year, and we make sure that we do it within certain temperature windows. So we're making sure that the water is at a temperature that is suitable for the virus, and which we're looking for. So we've taken a temperature reading earlier and we're absolutely fine. So we're coming around and we're getting a visual inspection of every one of the holding ponds. Okay, so we've got a copy of the site plan on our iPad. We're walking around with the operator and we're making sure that we've seen all the fish on the site. We're making sure that we are seeing no presence of disease. So when we're looking at the ponds, we're obviously looking for things such as mortalities, lethargic fish, also other clinical signs of disease. During this walk round, we're also making sure that the site plan that we hold on our records is accurate, that the site hasn't changed any of the ponds, removed ponds, added ponds, changed configurations. It is one of their authorisation conditions that they have to make us aware of any changes to the site. So we're making sure that the site hasn't done that. And lastly, we're just making sure that any measures that the farm states that they're doing within their biosecurity measures plan, we're making sure that they are actively doing those. So I've reviewed Franklin's BMP before I came on site today. I noticed that, one of their measures, for example, was the fact that the farm is fenced and netted, which is done in order to hopefully prevent both avian and mammalian predators, which is one of the measures that these guys take in order to protect the biosecurity of the site. So we're walking around, we can see that the fence is there, we can see you know that the ponds are netted. Cool. So we're just carrying out the visual stock assessment now. So I've donned my polarized glasses. They remove the sort of surface refraction of the sunlight, so it allows me to see more of the fish. So what I'm doing is I'm slowly just making my way from the start of the end of the pond and just trying to get a real good look at the fish. I mean, you can probably see them yourself. You know, they're swimming around very happily, actively looking for food. I can see no mortalities, I see no clinical signs of disease whatsoever. So I'm happy that these fish are in a good state of health. But we're just walking around the whole site and having a real good look in every one of the ponds. Brilliant. So our visit today's come to an end. We've done the routine disease inspection visit and everything's looking very healthy. So we're happy with that. And we've gone through the compliance aspect, and the Franklin's guys here are all compliant against each of the authorization conditions that's detailed within their authorization certificate. So all that's left to say is thank you very much, Mike.
Thank you.
I've detailed all your information onto the FHI iPad. One aspect that we didn't film was just me running through with Mike about production figures and also employment stats and various other bits of information that we collect during a visit. But we've got all that down. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.
We'll do, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so hopefully you all saw and heard that. That was just a brief view of what we get up to. I think it's worth noting that, probably I didn't mention in my introduction to that video, that there are around about 500 authorised sites in England and Wales, and they basically produce for the team of 12 inspectors anywhere between 900 and 1,000 site visits a year. Roughly 60% of those visits are scheduled, so we know we're going to do them, and the other 40 are what we call ad hoc, which is visits based on either an intelligence submission from another government agency that we work with very closely, other agencies such as the Environment Agency, Marine Management Organisation, National Crime Agency, all of those people we work with on a very close basis. And so we might get phone calls from the members of the public, anglers who are fishing and they're seeing fish in distress or a mortality in a fishery. So there's a certain percentage of what we do is very reactive to what's happening. That's hopefully giving you a fairly good overview of what we do and what our sort of bread and butter work is. This is the part where I offer the floor open to any questions. If you've got any, speak now or forever hold your peace, as they say. Jerry.
Hello. Hi,
Hello.
John. Excellent. Really impressed with that. I've been out a couple of times with inspectors when I was first started at Cefas and previously when I was your PM. Always fascinates me. That's why I wanted to join this one. I have a question.
Okay.
So the inspectors are working. So the dynamics of these farms that you're visiting aren't really changing that much. It's people who are pretty much established, and this is their bread and butter. This is their, not just their livelihood, it's their work, life and play, what they're doing and everything. So your relationship with these farms, how do you cope when you find something? Because you know you've got to keep that professional business side of it, but how do you cope when you've worked with these people for so many years and you know potentially you're about to affect their livelihood? That's my question.
That's a really good question, Jerry. I mean, first up, thankfully that doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. It happens. We have occasionally found serious diseases. We've had to put movement restrictions on farms, and in some of the more severe cases, those farms will undergo a complete cull and disinfection to protect our wild and native stocks from what's being found. The good thing with the Inspectorate is we are made up of a broad range of skill sets, and we all come from the industry, various parts. And I think, you build a relationship up with the stakeholders over a number of years. Most of them have been in the game for a very, very long time. They know what's expected of them, and they do pretty much everything they can to prevent anything going wrong. And they understand that, when things do go wrong, we are there to help. Okay, some of those things may be pretty hard to take, but we are there to help, and they know that we, through experience and through word of mouth, that we do everything we can to keep people in business, to prevent anything more serious happening than absolutely needs to be. And as I said, word gets around. It's quite a small industry, and everybody knows everyone else, and I think our track record tends to speak for itself in those situations. I saw another question somewhere pop up about, has Brexit affected what we do? Yes, is the very short answer to that. It's affected it's not so much what we do, but it's affected the industry, and we have had to change and evolve a little bit, and we are learning the ropes at the same time as the industry. It was quite a dynamic, it still is quite a dynamic environment post the 1st of January, where there were very, very rapid changes in rules, things that we probably didn't foresee, things that the industry didn't foresee, and probably things that the EU didn't foresee. However, again, our role, one of our primary roles, is to support our industry, and that's what we do, walking them through the various new challenges that Brexit has thrown in their path. For instance, I've mentioned my job this morning at the market. That was brought around purely because the guys who have spent decades importing eels for jellied eels and smoking from the Netherlands, they can't do that anymore, and so they've been scrabbling around trying to find other sources of other species of eels. This is the European eel we're talking about specifically. And obviously, there was an illegal import of Anguilla australis, which we can't allow. But obviously, we'll try now to advise that guy on what he can and can't do, and see if we can't walk him through some processes that might enable him to push his business in a slightly different way. But there are a lot of challenges with EU exit, and it's not going to be something which we iron out particularly quickly. But I think we're doing a pretty good job. I see no more hands. Does that mean I get no more questions? Good. Okay. Oh no, there's a hand up. You, and you've got a question.
Yeah, sorry. I missed the first bit of your talk, John. It's all really interesting. But you were talking about the working in Indonesia with the endangered elasmobranchs and stuff. And yeah. I just wondered, is there any relationship between that kind of identifying the provenance of different kinds of fish, different species, whether they've been taken illegally? Does that work come into the fish health inspectorate at all? Genetic testing or things like that?
It's something that when you look at, particularly when you look at work abroad, quite often it's quite hard to see how it relates to what you do in your day job here in the UK. But of course, what we're looking at there is a system whereby the Indonesian authorities want to regulate the export of not only CITES species out of Indonesia, but also it's complicated further by the fact that they do allow movements of and trade in elasmobranchs around the Indonesian archipelago. So what are we looking at? Well, it's not really any different than an export certification that we might apply to some koi carp going to the Channel Islands, for instance. You're looking at the provenance of those fish. You're making sure that they're properly certified. You're looking to see that they've come from the right place. They're in our case, that they're healthy and they're not displaying any signs of diseases. And so you can see quite clearly then that really the sort of skill sets that we have within the Inspectorate are quite easily transferable. And first, when I went out to Indonesia the first time, it was a little bit kind of like, well, how does this fit in with my knowledge base and my skill set? But of course, it does quite easily.
Great, thanks very much.
Cheers. Anybody else? Okay. Well, I think I have managed to successfully record this session, so I think those recordings are going to be made available. So Ewan, as I said, if you missed the start, and there'll be a recording somewhere. Thanks for all attending. I hope it was useful. I hope you've got a little bit more of an insight into what we do. And if you any further questions, I'm sure you can find my email address on the delegates list, and feel free to get in touch. Thanks very much, everyone.
Thanks, John. Bye.
Thank you.